As a new parliament member for the ruling Likud party after a relatively brief media career, and 2 years ago was appointed deputy foreign minister after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declined to fill the foreign minister spot. She is a forceful advocate for the Netanyahu government's policies on the international scene, and she is seen as a leader of the party's younger generation, and we're happy to have her in our studio.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
Very happy to be here.
Deputy Minister, we just saw the broadcast from Sochi in Russia, where the future of Syria is being decided, basically. We saw the Iranian leader, Rouhani, there as part of that. We did not see anyone from the United States, and of course Israel has its concerns. Is it not a concern to Israel that right now that Syria's future is being decided and Iran is a key player?
Well, first of all, of course, it's a major concern. And this is something that we're very consistent about. We're delivering this message to Putin, and we're delivering this message to all our allies. Israel is going to do everything in order to keep its interest in the north side of our border, which is Syria, of course. And we don't like the fact that Syria is going through Iranization. We don't like the fact that Iran is a major player now in our northern border. We are surrounded with Iranian proxies, Hamas, in our southern border. And now it seems like Iran is even getting stronger on our northern border. And we're going to do everything in order to defend the Israeli interest. And I think I don't need to extend this phrase anymore. Everyone understands what does it mean, and it means also very close coordination with the Russians.
I do want to understand, though, a little bit more what it means, because we do hear very often from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, from the defense minister, that we are prepared to defend our interests. And certainly that voice against Iran or against Hezbollah, whether it's in Lebanon or in Syria, is very loud. But what specifically, how far is Israel willing to go? Farther than it has already gone?
Well, I think the question is not how far we're willing to go. We're going to do everything in order to defend our country. And as always, I mean, Israel never thought there is a distance problem or any other issue when it comes to defending our country issues. So I think it's very clear that we're going to do everything in order to make sure that the Iranian presence won't last, and we'll do everything in order to protect ourselves from certain weapons and everything that is considered with the fact that the area is going through Iranization.
Let's talk about another relationship. If we're talking about coordination with Russia, let's talk about another relationship that's taking a lot of focus, that with Saudi Arabia. We have heard a shift recently. It has been an open secret that there are ties, but we have heard the Israeli military chief speaking to a Saudi newspaper. We've heard an Israeli minister confirming in one way or another that there are contacts. What is the nature of Israel's relationship today with Saudi Arabia?
Well, it's very clear that the Arab world is going through a transformation. And for many years, it was, I think it was an assumption that the main issue in the region is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and all the other will arrange itself after this will be solved. And today, more than ever, I think, it's very clear that it's the other way around. Today is very clear that actually we're getting closer to the Arab countries because of the fact, the mutual threat of Iran, because of the fact that Israel is not the demon that it used to be 50 years ago and 40 years ago. And people are starting to realize that Israel is an asset at the Middle East. And I think that I would mention the fact that yesterday we mentioned and celebrated 40 years to the historic moment of Sadat coming to Israel and delivering the peace promise in the Israeli parliament. And the fact it was actually an Israeli initiative. It was Menachem Begin that was reaching out to Sadat, wants to reach peace agreement. And one thing is for sure, every time there is a willingness in the Arab world to go together with Israel, with shared interests, with mutual, concerns about the region, we are there. We're there to create this new future.
I just want to follow up briefly on that. One thing we hear very often from Palestinian analysts who are here in the studio on a regular basis is that there can never be a deal, there can never be peace or even normalization on a regional basis without a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Well, as you know, there are 25 years of experience of trying to solve the conflict in a certain formula. And I think this government is actually saying a few things. We're saying, first of all, that no formula will be safe to the region if eventually we'll get a second Gaza. What happened when Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip is that Gaza fell into a terror regime, and it was bad both to the Israeli side and to the Palestinian side. And one of the things we are really worried about is what's going to be on the other other side. I mean, the biggest question is, are we going to have a peaceful border, or are we going to have another Hamas regime? And the answer, by the way, is quite clear. We're going to have another Hamas regime. This is why it's so dangerous, both to the safety of the Palestinians and for the Israelis.
So before we even get to that point, there are two processes going on right now that we hear about: the Palestinians, this reconciliation process, that they're in Egypt, bringing Hamas into the Palestinian Authority. But we're also hearing reports the Trump administration is about to present a plan to try to renew peace talks. Is your government ready to sit down and talk peace with Mahmoud Abbas while that reconciliation process with Hamas is going on?
Well, first of all, we said that very clearly that this shaking hands with terror organization, we see it that it's like saying we're not interested in peace. We're actually interested to be part of the Hamas regime. We're interested to go in this pattern, and unfortunately, we see that all the way. And I think what the Trump administration is actually, it's sending a very good message to the Palestinians. I think all the way since this administration started, we actually feel a new wind coming from Washington. And what we feel is they're putting the finger on the right spot. First of all, that the main issue in the Middle East is Iran. And the second thing, if we want to reach peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, the first thing that should happen is stop funding terrorism. And this was where the finger was pointed when Trump went into the White House.
Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely, stay right here and hold that thought. More on those winds of change from Washington when we're back after a quick break. Don't go anywhere.
I-24 News.
Politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Esta semana en News 24, hace 40 años Sadat en Israel, una visita que cambió el Medio Oriente. Hace 70 años, las Naciones Unidas votan la creación del Estado de Israel. Recordaremos a Osvaldo Araña, que presidió la histórica sesión. News 24, el magazine semanal en español de I-24 News.
Welcome back. You're watching The Rundown. We're continuing our conversation with Israeli Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely. And before the break, we were talking about some winds of change from Washington. There are a lot of reports about Trump's proposed plan for peace that may or may not be presented soon. What is the Israeli government's understanding of anything, any outlines of what the White House has in mind?
Well, first of all, the only thing I can tell you is that they were willing to understand that transferring Jews or Arabs is not a good idea. And the idea of uprooting settlements, because settlements are not the issue of this conflict, is not going to be part of the program. I think this is a very good place to start. The second thing I think that was delivered as a message from Washington all the time, that they will never impose a peace agreement when it's not acceptable on the two sides.
Can I clarify that remark you just made? So
this was, by the way, the president's declaration.
Okay, but you have assurances from Washington that any peace proposal they have does not involve removing Israeli settlements.
No, I didn't say we have that as a promise. They said they will never impose anything that's going to make Israel unsafe or anything that's going to harm our national security issues.
But we did hear Benjamin Netanyahu in that press conference with President Donald Trump.
Wait a second. It's definitely the Israeli government's approach. The Prime Minister said it very loud, and it's definitely my opinion about it. The idea of uprooting people from the place where they belong, Judea and Samaria, are places where Jews belong to 3,000 years. I think this is a misconception of the conflict.
Though? Are you willing to accept that no Palestinians should be moved?
We never offered Palestinians to move anywhere. It was never on the Israeli table. We always said if we want to live peacefully, Jews and Arabs should respect each other.
But is this government going to present its own proposal? There are some differences, even between yourself and the Prime Minister, on two states, which at times he says he's in favor. Does this government itself have a position it's going to to offer to the Americans?
Well, 3 principles, and I think we should be following those 3 principles. One, whatever will be the arrangement, IDF will remain between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River, because this is the only way to promise that this area, this region, won't fall into another terror organization hands. The second thing, and this is, by the way, for the safety both for the Palestinians and for the Jewish state. The second thing is Jerusalem will be united, no matter what is the security arrangements or the things that will be settled between the 2 sides. Jerusalem will always be our capital as a united city. And the third, as I mentioned, is the fact that no Jews or Arabs will be removed from the
So I want to come
place.
back to one key word that is sort of the word we always hear that you just mentioned, which is settlement. You said it's not the issue in this conflict, but certainly many would not agree with you. And we did hear in that press conference between Benjamin Netanyahu and President Donald Trump saying, I will want you to hold back on settlements at some point. I will want you to hold back on settlements. That has not happened yet. Do you foresee this government willing to do that at Trump's demand?
Well, I want to say that this is the first American administration for years, since 1967, that actually didn't say settlements are obstacle to peace. So I think actually the approach is quite different.
They did ask them to roll back.
I think that what is happening today is that we're building, because of 8 years of freeze building, because of the Obama administration, we're not able really to build whatever we want, because there is a matter of, planning those communities to grow. This is really not the issue. Everyone knows that the refusal of the Arab world to accept the idea of a Jewish state started way before 1967. This is 100 years of conflict, has nothing to do to the war at 1967. Actually, it's the other way around. The 1967 war started because the Arab world refused to accept the idea of a Jewish state.
Without going back in history, just to put a final point on it, does this Israeli government understand itself to have a free hand on settlement building in the Trump era?
As I said, even if we will have a free hand, the ability to build is quite, it has a maximum rate because of the fact we didn't plan for 8 years, because of the settlement freeze, for the fact that Obama didn't really allow that to happen. Of course, I was against that. I think this is something that is absurd, that Jews can't build in their own
and
homeland.
that has changed. Right?
Yes, I think that it's definitely changed, because settlements are not the issue.
Deputy Minister, I want to move to another issue. In November, you were scheduled to speak at the Princeton Hillel. They canceled out on you. This is what you had to say at the time.
Okay.
My visit to Princeton was canceled by Hillel, which was supposed to have hosted me because of the pressure put on it by Jewish students who disagree with my political point of view. I intend to give my lecture this evening at Princeton. Chabad has agreed to host me.
Deputy Minister,
Yes.
It's certainly nice.
It was quite an experience.
It's nice Chabad agreed to host you, but Chabad represents a tiny portion of American Jewry. Hillel, for decades, has been the main Jewish representation of mainstream American Jewry on campus. So I have to ask you, is Israel losing the young Jews of America? And doesn't your government have some responsibility for that through some of the policies that you're pursuing, not just the ones regarding the Palestinians?
No, I have to ask you, what is happening with Hillel? What is happening with freedom of speech and academic freedom? What is happening to the very, basic human respect, to the fact you're inviting overseas representative of the Israeli government, and you're canceling on the same day because some Jewish students don't like my opinions? This is something really bad that is happening under what I call the liberal dictatorship. And this is something that you should be concerned when it comes to the way Hillel is treating Israeli representatives. Now, by the way, I got a backup even from left-wing people in Israel, because they realize that the problem is really not the Israeli government, but it's actually the fact that those young people in the top Ivy League universities are not willing to open their minds to different opinions. And I think this is tragic. And it has nothing to do to the way the Israeli government is handling, because you should have asked me this question if I wasn't doing the reach out to Princeton, and if I would have stayed in Israel and say, I don't care about these people, but I do care about these people. Some of them are my brothers, some of them are the Jews, of course, some of them are Americans, young Americans that I'm interested to talk to.
I'll answer you that, what I heard from one of my American Jewish friends. You ask what is happening on Hillel. he said, what is happening in Israel? That I can't go and pray as I wish to pray at the Western Wall. Because of the arrangement, because the government backed down, for example, on the Western Wall arrangement. At a time when, I'm not disputing what you're saying in terms of the estrangement and the trends in American Jewry, but then why isn't this government doing everything it can on either unrelated issues to try to bring American Jewry closer to Israel?
Well, I think that it's a very important goal to bring American Jews closer to Israel. I think this is one of my goals, but we need to be open about this. The solution that the Israeli government found about the Kotel issue, which having a beautiful place called Israel. I've been there. Most of the time it's empty. And the reason it's empty, if you're asking me, it's not because they don't like the arrangement. The reason it's empty is because most of the time those people are not even interested to go to the Kotel. And the Israeli government was doing really a lot in order to make sure that people, they can have egalitarian prayer, women can go together with their families, men can go together with the daughters. Everything is set up, but they're not willing to get that, because if you're asking me, this is a political matter, and they want to get recognition through the Kotel issue, and they're making a religious, holy place, holy site,
so
something for political dispute. And I really think that the solution that was offered was quite good.
In the little time we have left, I just want to understand a little more about this issue. When we're talking about what we hear described as an abyss between American Jewry and the Israeli government, for many reasons, whether it's a massive ideological divide, whether it's egalitarian prayer at the Western Wall, conversions, or the lack of Israeli-Palestinian peace, American Jews are believed to be today and very vocally growing much farther from Israel. Can you understand those Jews that feel that they no longer have a connection with Israel on any level?
Well, I can't understand that, because maybe they're too young to remember how it feels to be a Jewish person without a Jewish homeland, without a Jewish state. And I think the memory is too short. 70 years ago, the Jewish people went through a horrible Holocaust because there was not a nation state for the Jews to go to.
So should all Jews be accepted in that nation state?
Of course. I'm always saying this is the home of all Jews from all streams. Everyone is welcome to come here to influence Israeli politics. Please come. As I said, I'm willing not to have a right-wing leadership in order to have all Jews sharing this beautiful, amazing place that is called Israel. But there is another issue. And I think the other issue is not understanding the complexity of the region. People that never send their children to fight for their country. Most of the Jews don't have children serving as soldiers, going to the Marines and going to Afghanistan or to Iraq. Most of them are having quite convenient life. Right. They don't feel how it feels to be attacked by rockets, and I think part of it is to actually experience what Israel is dealing with on a daily basis.
We have to
by the way, and still creating an amazing place.
Deputy Foreign Minister Tzipi Hotovely, thank you very much for being here.